Today, we're going to acknowledge a common experience for victims and survivors, and that's the chaos that their current or ex-abusive partner causes on holidays and special occasions of any kind. And I'll start by pointing out several ways that abusers attempt to sabotage special occasions, and I'll talk about reasons why they do this. Then I'm going to share the importance of expecting sabotaging behaviors and preparing for these tactics while setting and upholding boundaries. And finally, I'll wrap up our time together by addressing your questions and comments. Okay, so it's very common for victims and survivors of abuse to have a partner or ex-partner who will ruin the holidays or ruin a birthday or ruin a funeral or a wedding and so forth. And many can identify with the chaos that comes on special occasions when dealing with an abusive person. Holidays, birthdays, and even vacations with abusers can be really difficult. And even long after a relationship has ended with somebody who's causing harm, when a connection remains in place due to shared custody of the children or other means, these happy celebrations can be really disrupted by their attempts to exert control, ultimately sabotaging your special day. Holidays and special occasions have a way of stealing the attention from a narcissist. So they will attempt to shift the focus back onto them by any means possible, even if it's through their negative attention, which I'll talk more about in some examples in a minute. And also, holidays don't just steal the attention, but narcissists really understand that you are likely to not exert your boundaries because you don't want the holiday to be disruptive or to be disrupted. And so they know they kind of have you vulnerable in those instances. Abusers often have retaliatory, punitive, domineering spirit about them. So they get a level of satisfaction from interrupting or sabotaging the joy out of holidays and special occasions. They do this in various ways. And I'm going to just go through a list of some of the ways that you might experience this type of disruption. The first one is making it all about them. For example, dominating conversations, taking over the spotlight, and speaking overly confidently about themselves, or they may even do the opposite, including saying or doing something inappropriate to get the attention back on them, disrupting conversations, disrupting the day in these various kinds of attention-getting ways. Or the abuser may start an argument with someone in the family or within the victim's friend group. Or if the abuser is an ex-partner, for example, they may change the schedule last minute, possibly instead of giving the kids over on Christmas Eve, they may disrupt Christmas Eve and hold on to them and deliver them on Christmas Day, if they even do that. Or they may start an argument before an evening even begins, so that the victim is stressed and worn out when they arrive. And another one is that the abusive partner may show up emotionally distant, aloof, or even sulking or in a bad mood, knowing that it's going to be a downer on the room and steal joy from the victim, the children, or close family members. Or they may arrive in a bossy mood. They may assert a high level of control over the victim's time, so they can't do all the fun and meaningful social activities that they had planned. One way that they do this is by bullying the victim with threats to prevent the victim from, for example, traveling to see their parents for the holidays or grandparents or siblings. Or they may prevent the victim from attending a special family occasion that requires travel to get there. I mean, even if it's getting in the car for a couple of hours, sometimes abusers are so controlling that they say and do whatever they can to prevent or prohibit the victim from doing so. Another one is that the abusive partner may show up late and expect everyone to be thankful they even came, or they may show up late and expect everybody to wait on them to serve dinner, even though the food had already been ready. So the focus is there again on them and their control. Or they may not show up when they said they would at all. For example, your ex-partner may say they'll be at a special holiday performance at the kid's school, and then they don't show up. And then the parent who is actually there will need to manage the disappointment and sadness the child feels. This is really common, where they will tell you that they're going to do something. And so you get your expectations and you set the expectations of the kids only to have them do the opposite. Or the abusive partner may put the victim down or make degrading remarks about the victim's family or friends, or falsely accuse the victim of something that draws everyone's attention towards, something that some outrageous action that the victim supposedly made. And this accomplishes two things for the abuser. The abuser plays the victim while negative attention is brought onto the actual victim. So the victim is now in this situation of being put on the hot seat by false accusations, while the abuser then plays the victim. And that can be really disruptive dynamics in a holiday setting. Or an ex-abusive spouse may refuse to communicate prior to the holidays when the victim tries to secure a mutually beneficial holiday schedule, leaving the victim and children without the security of knowing where they can be and when over the holidays, waiting to the very last minute so that you can't properly plan and organize your schedule. Or the abusive partner may criticize everything, and when the victim attempts to accommodate the abuser's complaints, nothing is satisfactory enough. Or sometimes the abuser is not overtly argumentative. Instead, they may do the opposite and give the silent treatment, refusing to communicate with the victim or their family, or having a general unwillingness to participate in a family tradition. Maybe it's even that they're at the location and they won't participate in a family game, or it could be a family event. Their pouting presence, their sulking presence sucks the life out of the room. They may be nice to the victim in front of others while ignoring the victim or being nasty to the victim when others walk away or aren't looking or aren't in the room. They may speak poorly of the victim to others, saying bad things about the victim in front of them or even behind their back, leaving family and friends not knowing what to do or who to believe, and just kind of just dropping a bomb in the room with their negativity and their accusations. They may use threats or promises in their attempts to control the holidays. And when it comes to gift giving, abusive partners often don't reciprocate gift giving. And if they do, they may intentionally give the gift a victim that he or she doesn't want. They may give the victim the gift that the abuser wants for themselves, and then call the victim ungrateful and focus on the victim's negative feelings rather than the abuser's manipulative behaviors. And this happens very often. Or they may give the victim a gift that she wants, and then rob the victim of joy receiving that gift, accusing them of not appreciating the gift enough. So the victim says thank you and is appreciative, but the abuser raises the bar and says, well, you don't realize what I had to do to get that, and you're not appreciative enough. So they still take the joy and blame the victim falsely for whatever their presentation is. They just can't meet the bar. They may act offended that the victim didn't appreciate their gift enough, claim they lied about how much they liked it, take it back and say they don't deserve it at all. Any of these things can happen, and it just turns gift giving into another hostile, where you anticipate a hostile exchange. Or they give an elaborate gift and hold it against the victim later, constantly reminding them and using it as a ploy to put the victim down and say they're not appreciative. When they receive a gift from the victim, they might sulk at what they got or criticize the gift in one way or another. If they have money to get others gifts, the abusive partner may act like a miser and significantly limit the victim's access to funds, so the victim can't reciprocate with the family members in gift giving. Or the abusive partner may exhibit behaviors that upset the victim or distract them from enjoying special moments. For example, they may flirt with somebody at the party in front of the victim in an overt way, so that the victim is left in this holiday moment wondering, do they speak out and address this, or do they just stay quiet and accept it so that they don't disrupt the holidays? And this is an example of what I mentioned at the very beginning, where the abuser counts on the victim wanting to hold the holidays together so they can act out in ways knowing the victim isn't going to really do anything about it. They may leave without saying anything or abandon the victim. This happens a lot where, let's say the victim, accepted an invitation to go to a Christmas party. And so you RSVP and you say both people are coming. And then the abuser intentionally causes a fight or does something that they know the victim will really have to set a boundary on right before going to the event. And then the abuser just doesn't show up to the event. They just say, I'm not going. And so the victim is left, gosh, we RSVP'd, it's formally set tables. If we don't go, there's 2 people empty at this table. And so the victim is torn with, do I go alone? Do I call the host last minute? It's just very disruptive. The abusive partner may have events within their family or friend groups and exclude the victim from attending with them. They may not even tell the victim about an invitation that came the way through the abuser, or they may suddenly exclude the victim from going to a work party, leaving the victim feeling insecure as to why. Or they may break up with the victim at the worst moment, maybe right before a party or right after an enjoyable time together, to rob the victim of joy, only knowing that they're going to try to get back together with the victim later. It's just this ploy to really hijack the victim's joy and cause them to feel distress. Or a common thing that happens during the holidays and at special events is drinking or substance abuse. An abusive partner is more likely over the holidays to drink, to get drunk and draw attention to himself, even if it's negative attention. Abusive partners are more likely to self-medicate during the holidays because of other stressors and their need to be in control. There are more ways, so many more ways, that abusers sabotage events, but this list really helps us to see just how chaotic it can be for a victim or a survivor in dealing with a narcissist during these special occasions or at the holidays. And attempts by the abuser to exert control over the holidays are very real. And if you aren't prepared for these kinds of events to happen, they can hijack your holiday experiences. So now I just want to take a pause and ask you if you can relate with any of these ways that the holidays and special occasions are sabotaged, or if you are comfortable, maybe you can share ways that you've been harmed during special events. We would love to just read off some of your comments to enrich our conversation.
Annette, as they're coming in, we already have, as you were sharing all those ways of causing harm and distraction and destruction and sabotage, a lot of things were relatable. And so I'm just going to start reading them now because
Sure.
somebody said already there's a ton of useful information. And I think I'd like to go back over it later. They were asking for a recording. And yes, this will be recorded for anybody who's here. You will receive that recording and you can also find it on our website. We have someone who said, having seen every one of these behaviors before, it's validating and enlightening to see them laid out all in one place.
Mm.
Somebody else said, I have as well, seen these all before. Another person saying, absolutely, they have experienced this. And another individual saying, thank you for highlighting what was 13 years of my norm of living in an upside down world.
Oh,
Yes. And another saying, I can 100% relate. My ex would routinely cancel events after we RSVP. Mine would also rage right before a vacation or another fun event.
yeah,
And
so common.
someone said it's hard to choose just one. I've experienced them all from my mother in law.
Oh gosh, that's so hard.
Yeah.
Okay, well, why do abusers sabotage holiday? Well, first off, thank you for your comments. We can see it's relatable, and in my past experiences, I certainly dealt with many of these examples, and clearly you have too. But why do abusers sabotage holidays and special occasions? Ultimately, they want to exert control, and they have a mindset. It's deeply rooted within them. It's negative. You know, there's in any given situation, there's perceptions. We can choose to take the good out of a situation. Now, I'm not talking about real life adversity, where somebody is medically, really ill, or, these life-altering events. I'm talking about situational things that come up in everyday life. Our life is full of challenges. And most empathic people who are the victims choose to see things in a positive light. They know that they need to plow through that situation and remedy it, or if they can't remedy it, they need to adapt and make the best of the situation. But abusers tend to think not in those positive ways. They're very judgmental. They're critical of others. And so this, or critical of the victim, and this all comes out in them, this negative motivation to retaliate by making sure that the victim is put in their place. It's to dominate, to make the victim miserable for something that they're experiencing joy about. For example, the abuser doesn't like it when the victim has, let's say that the victim has done a creative art project for Christmas, and she's really happy about that. He doesn't like it when there's something drawing the victim's attention to something else. And so he will criticize it as though it's stupid or a waste of time. They just have this negative motivation. But holidays, birthdays, anniversaries, weddings, these are times when people feel joyful and they celebrate. And these special occasions are times when we pay attention to other things, the spotlight moving from the narcissist onto another person or thing is threatening to an abuser. In post-separation situations, the abuser wants to retaliate so the victim cannot enjoy herself in her newfound autonomy. They really try to exert control and steal that autonomy away by powering over them in any way that they can. And sabotaging the holidays is another way for a current or ex-abusive partner to try to gain control and attention as they say or do destructive things in an attempt to unhinge the victim. They use any tactic they can as a means to keep the attention on their own power while squelching the joy and pleasure of others. For some, it may be that they're bored and they find it entertaining to cause others grief. That's quite sociopathic, or they may have a rigid idea of how the holidays must look, must be, and they refuse to consider anything outside of that, as it would threaten their sense of power and control. They're not collaborative. They don't reciprocate. They want to dominate the schedule. They want to dominate the way things unfold. They may employ destructive behaviors and tactics in an attempt to gain sympathy from others. They love playing the victim, or they may, I'm sorry, I usually don't forget to turn my phone off. Or they may do it intentionally to exclude people from being able to spend time with their children. It's just another way to show that they are the boss, they're the person in the driver's seat, and they don't feel any remorse from sabotaging events for the kids or for other people who are hoping to spend time with their family. Abusers in a current relationship with a victim often use special occasions as an excuse to get away with behavior that would otherwise cause the victim to set a firm boundary with consequences. I've said this now a couple of times. The abusive spouse knows full well that the victim will not cancel plans, so they're less likely to set and hold a boundary that will interfere. She doesn't want to ruin the holidays, which means the victim will tolerate a lot more. And they instinctively know this. And that's why right before your birthday or right before some other special occasion, they'll rage or they'll argue or they'll do something that they know will be really upsetting to you because they know they'll get away with it. So boundaries. Every relationship needs boundaries, and even more so when dealing with someone who is causing harm emotionally or physically, or when dealing with someone who has caused harm and the survivor still has to interact with them regarding children, for example. Boundaries are still a necessary part of life for all of us. Boundary setting with an abuser who lives in the same house during the holidays can be difficult. And I mean, boundaries with abusers, let's face it, are always difficult. They don't, just because you set a boundary doesn't mean they're going to honor that. And usually they don't. And I'm going to get a little bit more into that in a minute, but victims often feel helpless and stuck with what they can and cannot do, or what they can do about the boundary setting. And when it comes to the holidays, victims spend more time at home alone with their abuser than at any other time of the year. So it intensifies the negativity in the household. It's escalated is what I'm trying to say. So they may even feel more worn down than at other times of the year. Boundaries can be very difficult for anyone who's in a relationship with an abusive person, but setting and upholding boundaries with a current abusive partner is still possible. I recommend deciding what boundary or boundaries you will put in place and choosing boundaries that you can and will uphold. So even if it's just a baby step, it's scary sometimes to set boundaries. And I want to state that a boundary is not what you tell a person that you will or will not tolerate. That's part of the boundary. But what really makes it a boundary versus a complaint or nagging at somebody is when you tell them what you will do if they do not comply. And that puts the onus on you, the person setting the boundary, to follow through with the consequence. So it's really hard to follow through with consequences if you aren't used to it, especially if you've been in an abusive situation for an extended period of time and you've been worn down and your confidence has been worn down, and this abusive dynamic has been somewhat normalized where you are constantly accommodating the abuser just to keep peace. So you have this internal war within yourself. Do I accommodate or do I set a boundary? And most often victims will accommodate, but that's why I say take baby steps, set little boundaries that you can live with. Maybe it's saying, if you're going to talk to me that way, I'm going to leave the room. And you leave and you close the door and you lock the door. And it could be something like that, or it could be something more. I encourage you, if somebody says you can't go see your family, to get in the car and go see your family anyways and leave the abuser behind and just do that. But these are scary things because they come with retaliation. And so I don't want you to set a boundary and and let them know the consequence unless you're willing to follow through in it. So that's why baby steps can often help build your confidence. Okay, I got a little bit off track on that. So a boundary can look like saying, stop telling me that I am fill in the blank, fat, stupid, the B word, etc. And then leaving the room. The choice to walk away shows that you will not engage with this person when they choose that destructive behavior. And when the boundary is consistently upheld, it will become a stronger boundary, and they will understand that you're not going to tolerate it. Call out every time it happens and do the same thing every time. It's really not that difficult to walk out of the room unless you have the type of, if you don't have, okay, a lot of narcissists are avoidant. So they would never follow after you. They would just give you the silent treatment. But there are those that are not avoidant. They are more seeking attachment in an unhealthy way. And so they will pursue you relentlessly and follow you and bang on the door and that sort of thing. And I just encourage you to hold your boundary, whatever personality type your abuser is. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is a great resource, and they have educated counselors who are ready to listen and help at any time. And I encourage you to tap into that resource. Or if you need to leave and you don't have a safe place to go, you can go to your local domestic violence shelter or agency. Your safety is a top priority. So I don't want you to set a boundary with somebody who's violent, knowing that it's going to bring violence on you and the children. That's a situation where you need to have an exit plan, and you need to bring other people in confidentially to help you navigate what all that means for you. Know that abusers and ex-abusers are going to try to ruin your day and special occasions. Expect it and be prepared for it. If you have a history together, consider what they've previously done. The best way to anticipate what the future looks like is by revisiting past behavior, really understanding the patterns and expecting that they're going to repeat. Come up with a plan. Have canned answers. Write them down if you need to, so that you know how to respond. Will you stay in the conversation? Will you walk away? Will you hold a boundary? Will you acquiesce? Be prepared so that you're not sideswiped. And then you're in a situation where you're engaging with the abuser, but you're not prepared. You are just in the moment, and you're traumatized. And so you don't necessarily respond the way that, after thinking about it for an hour or so, you wish you would have responded in a different way. I want you to be prepared. Write things down so that when you're nervous and really upset, you can just look at that piece of paper and read the words that you had prepared. If you are in a relationship with an abuser, you can also emotionally detach from them and separate yourselves from their behavior. I'm going to get into this a little bit. Emotional detachment describes when you or others disengage or disconnect from other people's emotions. You can decide to not engage in the chaotic behavior, ignore the abuser, and go ahead with whatever plans bring you joy. Just consider it noise. Don't get engaged in what it means to you emotionally, what they're saying. I want you to emotionally disengage so that you're keeping your emotions in your own little, bubble, and don't allow their emotions, don't engage in their emotions, don't engage in the conversation and get drawn into that crazy making conversation that has no real end to it. For example, I know one victim who said her abusive spouse would cancel last minute to events or not show up. So I thought this was amazing. She responded to future events by only RSVPing for herself and the children. She told her spouse, if he wanted to attend, to be sure to RSVP himself. She also communicated to the organizer of each party that she could only RSVP for herself and her children. And she didn't say anything terribly disparaging about her spouse. She just said, I never know his schedule, if he's available or not. So I'm going to RSVP for me and the kids, and you'll have to deal directly with my husband about whether he'll be attending or not. And that actually was a wonderful demonstration of how to emotionally detach and set a reasonable boundary while also not allowing the abuser to destroy her opportunities for having a good time. So let's take a moment to understand the steps you can take within yourself to emotionally detach from someone who is abusive and controlling. Here are some things you can try. Identify the reason. Ask yourself why you're now deciding to detach from the relationship. Really understand. It's so important for victims to understand the behaviors being employed against them and really speaking to yourself in your mind so that you're not operating on that cognitive dissonance. That cognitive dissonance, for those of you who don't know that term, it's basically means that you're not accurately viewing the situation. If a third party were to look in on the situation, they would see it objectively, but you are caught in the dynamics of abuse. And so you tend to lose the ability to see things accurately. So it's so important to journal or to just have meaningful conversations with yourself or with a therapist that really highlights the patterns of behaviors and the reason that you need to emotionally detach, whether it's because they rage or because they're going to start an argument, and how you can just avoid engaging in that. Release your emotions privately to yourself or a trusted friend, therapist, or family member. Express your anger, express your confusion, express your hurt. Go ahead and process those, get those things out. Identifying how it's affecting you is also really helpful for you to not have cognitive dissonance. And the more accurately you view the situation, the more effectively you'll be able to respond versus react. Don't react. I want you to try to tell yourself, I am not going to react. I'm going to respond. I am not going to engage in a way that it causes me to lash out or to get completely meek and vulnerable and where you're sharing your emotions and your hurt. We don't want you to do that. We want you to respond in a thoughtful way, recognizing that you are dealing with somebody who doesn't make sense, who is chaotic. Try to view yourself more as a third party, looking in on your situation, looking down on it, like put yourself up in the air and you're looking down on the situation. Think of yourself as your daughter. How would you want your daughter to view the situation? So you're emotionally detaching. You're not going to take on the chaos. Start small. Initially, you may not have the confidence to go it alone without your abuser's approval. Take baby steps to build your confidence, as well as to become more skilled at setting boundaries that you can uphold. So I know I said take baby steps. I really want to encourage you to even though you might be so fed up and so emotionally ready to set a firm boundary, the truth is, in the moment, when you actually set that boundary, the abuser breaks it, and now you have to follow through with the consequences. So often victims become afraid during that stage and they back down. Really try to think of past events where you've tried to set boundaries that you didn't uphold, and practice with baby steps, because it's so essential that you build your confidence so that you can understand. For me, what I went through a lot is I would get really fed up and I would set this big boundary, and then my husband would be very avoidant and just act like he didn't care at all, and would just get in the car and leave for a week. And I didn't like that. That made me feel abandoned. I hadn't dealt with my fear of abandonment and how that affected me. And then I regretted setting the boundary, when what I really needed to do was just to hold strong, let him go, and still hold my boundary, and then have him deal with the consequences of leaving, which is a whole other conversation that I won't get into. But that was work I needed to do within myself. And it's work that you need to do within yourself. And that's why taking baby steps is so important to do, and to observe your feelings, write them down, and address those feelings of fear with a therapist or a trusted friend. Keep a journal. journaling can help you really get in touch with all of what's going on, so that in the moment when you're traumatized and you're not thinking very clearly, you have fragmented thinking, which is totally normal. It will give you an opportunity later to go back and say, no, he did really say that. And I did say this. And yet he said this about, he rewrote history. And it just helps you unlock the patterns, see things clearly. And it's also good to have a paper trail of what has happened for your own sanity and for any future court cases or anything like that. It's good to have it documented. Meditate or pray. Clear your mind of the words your abuser is throwing at you. Don't take them on. Don't let them invade your emotional well-being. Tap into your higher power and release what you cannot control. Take in the love for yourself, the love that you feel from people who support you. Take that in and understand and believe that you are valuable. We are all worthy of love and of loving ourselves and of receiving love in a kind way. We don't deserve to be mistreated. Nobody does. And so really meditate and pray on that so that you can fall in love with yourself again and realize your worth. Be patient with yourself. When setting boundaries, you may fail a few times before you have the courage to follow through, no matter the cost. Be patient with yourself. Understand it's a process. You are growing internally while you are learning to set these boundaries. You are growing in strength, and that takes time. Look forward, look to the future. When we grow from trauma into post-traumatic growth, so we can have post-traumatic stress, which if you're in an abusive situation, you likely do have post-traumatic stress, even if it hasn't been properly diagnosed. And you can look at other workshops that we've done where we talk about PTSD and complex PTSD. But we want you to get to a place of post-traumatic growth, which is really hard to do if you're still in the same home with your abuser, but it is possible if you successfully emotionally detach. I don't want you to dread the future. I want you to look for ways to being autonomous, emotionally autonomous, physically autonomous, having your own activities or creative projects to enjoy, spending time with friends, and so forth. The confusion that you get from being in an abusive situation often causes you to ruminate over and over again about what took place. And that causes you to isolate because you just don't have the energy to socialize, and you're depressed and you're full of anxiety. You can overcome that. And journaling can really help you to stop ruminating. When you can see tangibly what took place, then you can let it go and really stretch yourself to engage in art projects, creative projects, activities. Get yourself out of the house where you can have lighthearted interactions and of good people and increase those endorphins, because the stress of being in this kind of relationship is constantly producing cortisol and adrenaline, which is these really toxic hormones that deplete your body. And so you need to put endorphins back into your body. You need to make an effort to do things that will produce that for you. And that requires stretching yourself and doing things that you don't really feel like doing, but it will pay off, I promise you. You might be thinking, I could never do these steps. My spouse will act out and it will be so embarrassing. If they exhibit poor or embarrassing behavior, their behavior is embarrassing for them. It's not a reflection of you. Even if they blame you in the situation, just try to let it roll off your back. Be confident, be calm, as best as you can. Don't take it on. People will believe what you present. If you act all guilty and worn down, then they're going to wonder if you are guilty. If you just say, he's having a crazy moment again, or whatever you need to do, don't take it on. You've spent so many years protecting the secret of your abusive spouse's true behavior. You have been the one experiencing the consequences for his or her behaviors. Now it's time to allow the abuser to feel the consequences of their own behavior. In fact, when an abuser feels the consequences, that's the best way for change to happen. And there's so much more to say about that I don't have time to get into today. But consequences are a really loving thing to allow your abuser to experience. Many times it's best to simply not acknowledge their behaviors and not take their bait. You have the choice to just not engage. It can be helpful to have reminders to yourself, whether you keep it in your notes to look at, even if you keep it in your wallet, a little cheat sheet, so that you know that you're not going to be able to reason with this person. And even when you walk away or ask them to stop, they may still try to do what they can to get at you. So write down these ways. I know I've said that before, but the more that you are prepared, the more you won't react and you'll respond. And when you are under trauma, when you are under assault, your thinking is going to be very disconnected and fragmented. So those cheat sheets can be a lifesaver for you. Identify someone that you can talk through it with who will help ground you and affirm your strong stance for peace within and joy at the holidays. Taking care of yourself is a healthy top priority. You're so busy taking care of the children and of your abusive spouse. Is your abusive spouse taking care of you? No, they're taking care of themselves. So two people in the relationship, the victim and the abuser, are taking care of the abuser, but no one's taking care of you. It's time to divert the focus from caring for the abuser and focus on yourself. It's perfectly good. It's sound. It's psychologically, it's biblically, it's spiritually sound to take good care of yourself. Okay, I want to briefly talk. Let's see how we're doing on time. I'm going to have to talk fast. Boundaries post-separation. I want to now talk about boundaries after you've left a situation. The beauty is that contact can be minimal and you can choose to respond or not respond. Responding isn't always necessary. If you do respond, keep it brief. Ignore their insults unless you need to document a response that may compromise how the court will view the situation. Let's say they launch a false accusation that you know you didn't do. It's important to factually discredit that false accusation, just very bullet pointed, and then move on. You don't need to get emotionally drawn in. Just fact check, produce that, and move on. Ignore their insults, and just don't get engaged in that. Also, saying the word no is a complete response. That's all you need to say. And saying the word yes is also a complete response. You don't need to text a diatribe or write a long email. The shorter, the better. Don't even put your energy into it. Don't engage. Just say the facts, ignore the rest. I like to recommend the platform that the courts often use called Talking Parents. And there are other platforms courts use because it provides transparency to the courts. It's something that they recognize. That way they can see the interaction. So you basically block them from your text or email after you communicate that you'll only communicate on Talking Parents. And that way it's all documented. If you need, and that can be so helpful for you to prove, because these abusers will post-separation or post-divorce will often try to abuse you through the court system. So the more you can document their crazy-making behavior, which is so hard to explain to a court, the more the court will see tangibly what they're doing. If you need to drop off or pick up a child or children, it can be helpful to have someone you trust to join you. This person will be a good reminder to keep it quick and to help strengthen you with just their presence. And it may likely result in the abuser not being willing to act out, knowing that there's a witness there. Whatever boundaries you set post-separation, make them ones that you are willing to uphold, just like if you were in the relationship. Otherwise, you're just going to actually make it worse for yourself because they know you're not going to keep your boundary, and it's going to embolden them to be even worse. So the boundaries that you set are for you. Boundaries protect you and indicate to others what you are and aren't willing to accept, or you are not able to do. Just set them and stick with them. If you do have children, I want to affirm you in your role as a parent. Your children deserve your best self, your undivided attention, your love, your emotional connection, your warmth. They deserve to get the best of you and whatever you can do to protect yourself so you are emotionally and physically healthy and available to them will benefit you and them. When you set boundaries, you model for them what it is to take good care of oneself. It fosters an environment of emotional health and of emotional intelligence. Children learn from boundary setting. It gives them confidence. It gives them a self-identity. So it's a wonderful lesson to pass on to your children. And they know that they have a chaotic other parent. And so seeing you set boundaries can be really helpful. And especially if you explain those boundaries to your kids, age appropriate, of course, but explain the boundaries, the reasons why, then they'll be more emotionally intelligent to understand what's happening. I realize a lot of you have lost contact with your kids because they have been, the abuser was sabotaging you behind the scenes for years, like a leaky faucet. And so they had the wrong perception of you. But as you move on into this post-separation area, you can find opportunities to just set the boundaries and be as present for your kids as possible. So some children don't want to hear the details, and some do. And it's the more clear that you can communicate those things, and the more available you are to the children's needs, even adult children, where you don't play a victim, you don't, you just stay firm, and so that you're always available for them, that you love them, and that you are there no matter what, the better off it's going to be in your relationship moving forward. So as I wrap up, listen to yourself and trust yourself. Expect and prepare for tactics an abusive partner, ex-partner, that what they'll employ, an attempt to gain power and control during the holidays and other joy. You can have control over your own destiny if you're ready. So be ready and let yourself disengage. Refuse to go along with it. It's perfectly okay to hang up the phone, to leave the room, and so forth. Like I've gone into, so sorry. If you don't, I want you to also lean on family and friends. You can tell your family and friends that you don't want your abusive spouse invited. Oftentimes the family will continue to invite the ex, but you can explain to them, I don't want to spend my holidays with him. He is not safe. He causes me a lot of stress because I never know how he's going to behave, and you don't see everything that goes on behind the scenes. So I really need your support. If they refuse to support you, it is perfectly okay for you to choose to keep you and the children from going to your family holiday event. You can make some special new, tradition and create something very intimate and special for you and the kids. Don't feel like you have to put yourself in the line of fire if other people don't understand and support you. It may not sound ideal, but even being on your own would be better than opening up to the stress and angst that comes from dealing with the sabotaging behaviors of an abusive person during the holidays. It really just ruins the holidays in so many ways. Okay, so as we come to a close, I want to wish you a wonderful holiday season. We'll see you back here in the new year. We'll be kicking off our 2024 with a special guest for our January workshop. His name is Adam Dodge. I'm so sorry, you guys. Adam is the founder of EndTab, EENDTAB, an organization that seeks to and technological enabled abuse. So we're not experts in technology. Like when you get harassed through technology, or you're being tracked through technology. We're going to look at the ways that technology is used and misused by abusers, and how survivors can keep themselves safe in the digital world the same way they do in the physical world. Okay, so now I would love to hear your questions and comments.
Wonderful. I know these allergies and all this stuff is hard to deal with.
I know, I'm so sorry, everyone. Oh my gosh, I felt like I was coughing the entire time. I apologize.
That's okay. I was too, but I was on mute. I think it's very relatable right now.
Okay.
Okay, so we do have some questions. Somebody is asking, and well, first I'll read the comment and then get to the question. Narcissists are good at weaponizing the children against their co-parent, basically putting the children into a loyalty bind. This is the hardest to deal with because the children are hurting and need our help, but are attacking. What resources are available to assist in communicating with and managing children that are affected by a narcissistic parent?
This is such a difficult situation, and no two situations are exactly alike. So my answer is going to be kind of generalized. What I really think it's important for you to remember is to not do the same thing that your abuser is doing, even though it's so tempting, because they're being fed with so many lies, and they're being required to almost like police you and report. The abuser will say, well, what did your mom do here or there? Well, what did she say? Or they interrogate the kids. Something that you can do is to sit down and, without bringing in your personal problems, let them know that you love them so much, and that you're not going to do that to them, and that that's not healthy. And you can even it's all over the internet. Emotional intelligence with kids, depending on the age, they usually have, for smaller kids, they have faces of different emotions, more than just angry, happy, sad. They go into doubt, worry, confusion, disappointment, more advanced words. And you can help your kids identify how they feel when this happens to them, and tell them, validate them, tell them they have every reason to feel that way, and just really increase their emotional intelligence by helping them tap into more words to express themselves. And then show them how available you are for them. Show them how much you love them. Ask them about their life, about their activities, about their friends. Don't interrogate them, but just let them know you're so available to them. Don't tell them what to do and talk down to them, and make every conversation a teaching moment like we so often want to do. I was a queen at doing that, and I probably wore my kids out, but it's really not healthy. A better thing is to listen with a closed mouth, and just be present. Have your hand on their hand or on their shoulder, rub their arm or something that just shows that you are not judgmental, you are not critical, you are there for their well-being, for their best interests. And as they're older, if they're receptive, you can show them, do the same thing that I said, but you can also show them, if you go to our website, we have terms and definitions of abusive behaviors, and you can show them some of the behaviors that their dad or mom, whoever the abuser is doing, to help them have language to apply to that and see in writing that it's not healthy. This will help them organize their thoughts, just as it helped you organize yours. And kids at like 6th grade or so, maybe even younger, are able to comprehend this kind of information. So you can start really increasing their emotional intelligence at an early age. I just don't want you to say, well, then dad did this to me, and then dad said, try to be generalized, and try to show that you're not dumping your problems on them, and you're not going to be talking bad about him. You're just stating facts, and you are available for them. You are the person in their corner who cares for them, who loves them, who doesn't want them to be burdened with all of these adult problems that really shouldn't be their problem. That's the role that you can play to strengthen your relationship and to help them navigate the situation. Because when you actually, and another thing you can do is when you teach them the behaviors that they're likely to experience from their dad, like maybe they'll even look at the terms and definitions and say, dad always does this and this. You can teach them their own pat answers that they can be prepared to respond with. You can just teach them that they can walk out of the room, or they can say, I don't want to talk about it. Mom never talks about you. I don't want you talking about mom, or whatever clever response you can give them that they feel capable of saying. Maybe it's just that they lie and say, I don't feel well. I need to go lay down, to just give them a reason to exit the room. Maybe they can call you to come pick them up. I don't know how flexible it is, but give them options that they can employ so they can protect themselves from that barrage of negativity. Start to empower them, validate them. This will let them know that you're really there on their side and that you have their best interests in mind. Okay, Jill, any other questions?
Yes, there are a few more, and I love that answer. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
It's so equipping. This next question, I want to, if I can, real quick, speak to it. It starts with how should I have done something? So I just want to say at Mend, and we just like to teach this, that you make the best decisions you can at the time, and you did the best you could in that moment. So I want to just say, in hindsight, it's sometimes easier to say, well, I would have or could have or should have, but you did what you could. So this question I'm going
That
to
is so common.
it's
Yes.
so
Don't beat yourself up. We all make so many mistakes until we gain the full strength and clarity to move on. And then still we'll have setbacks. They just won't be as often, but no, it's okay.
Yes, so I want to share this question because I do think it could be very helpful for others who may have experienced something similar as well. So this says, my ex would use driving time as a time little and scold and bring me down to the dirt. I wanted so badly to just jump out of the car, but I was afraid for the life of my children as he was so overly angry. He would drive in a very aggressive and angry fashion. How could I get my kids out safely? Should I have just jumped and called the cops? How should I have created a boundary? Is the question.
What I would do, and this is very common, a lot of the raging types, not every abuser is a rager, but many of them are. And they choose an area where they have you trapped to do that. And the car is one of them. I would just secretly take out my phone and dial 911 and let them hear your spouse raging at you. Just don't even say anything for a few minutes. Let them hear that. And then once they've heard enough, pick up the phone and say, keep your license plate number memorized, and say, I'm heading down this freeway or this whatever, and my husband's driving erratically and raging at me and the kids. I need an intervention. And just report it. And that way it's documented. Don't be afraid to call the police, because trust me, if you do separate or leave at some point in time, your abuser, and maybe even during your relationship, your abuser will have no problem calling the police on you. Trust me, if it's between them being guilty and you being guilty, they're going to lie and make you guilty. So the more you can document their behavior, the more strength you will have. And that is setting a boundary that your abuser will know there are serious consequences. He's not going to get arrested, most likely, or if he does, he's going to get right out. And if he does get arrested, they're likely going to mandate that he goes to a batterers prevention program, which would be a good thing. And so I would just take authority and exert control over. If you don't do something like that to protect your kids, and somehow Child Protective Services learns that you allowed your children to be in that dangerous situation, you actually could lose the kids, because they want you to become stronger to know that you can set limits and boundaries with that abuser and to keep them distant. You actually are doing what is right by the law and by CPS to report it. It shows that you're a responsible parent and that you care for your kids. And so that's what I would do.
So much information. And I think sometimes it's so hard to know what to do because of the unexpected and not knowing and the unknowing of what's going to happen. So thank you for laying all of that out, Annette. I think it's so helpful. We have another one here about boundary placing. At the end of my relationship, I stopped engaging in conversations when I realized he was not going to listen. I told him it was not productive conversation, so I stopped talking. But it was used against me a lot, in all caps, that I would not engage in conversation. I stayed through with refusing to engage, and he raged all the more. What should I have done? Or what can be done if he rages with that firm boundary, refusing to engage?
If somebody is raging, I'm going to give the same answer. I would call 911 and let them hear him raging and just let them hear it going on for a couple minutes, and then say, you need an intervention. You need the police to come. When he knows that you're willing to call the police, he'll think twice about raging again. That's what I would do. Let there be consequences. Bring in other people, bring in authorities. Stay calm though, because he might lie and say you hit him. You need to be prepared for that. You need to stay absolutely calm and say, I have tried to disengage. I've tried to say, please don't talk to me unless you can be polite. And I've tried to leave the room, and he follows me and he rages all the more. Just document it is what I would have done. I would, it's hard to do that, I realize, but it's in your best interest to actually have the consequence and to have the protection of a police report, to have the documentation. So that's what I recommend.
Thank you, Annette. So
Yeah.
that's it for questions, but I want to share real quick just some feedback that this was all very relatable. A number of people were saying that throughout, clearly by the comments and questions in the chat. There was a lot that was said today that people had experienced. So
Yeah, I'm glad.
one did say it was bringing back horrible memories, and we're so sorry for that, but they followed it up with they're so grateful for the clarity and solutions through boundaries.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're out of that situation too.
Yes. One question just came in based on your answer that you just shared, Annette, just now. It says, how about stonewallers versus raging?
Yeah, that's what I dealt with. And it really required more internal work on myself to really not emotionally engage with someone who's going to be avoidant, stonewall, and keep you at a distance. The silent treatment usually comes with stonewalling. Basically, they're just not willing to listen to you. And so they're going to block any attempts at having a reasonable conversation where you can reach mutually beneficial solutions. So in that case, I say to really work within yourself and the emotion. Like when I went, let me see if I can scroll back up to my notes, to work on not reacting, but respond by simply saying, well, this is unproductive. When you want to have a productive conversation and stay on topic, I'm willing to resume and just disconnect. But it's going to give you angst, because honestly, when you have to disconnect from someone who's stonewalling you, it's a lot of effort to hold up that wall of protection, that guard that you have to hold up to protect your feelings. It takes a lot of effort, because what is natural is for us to want connection, for us to want reciprocity and collaboration, but it's not possible with an abuser. So it takes a lot of internal work by documenting things, by writing out your feelings. What are your fears? What is it that gives you the most anxiety? Is it fear of abandonment, like it was for me? Is it fear of something else, write down those fears and really look for solutions to those fears. Some might require therapy, others might just require a change in attitude. And it's all possible, but I would just familiarize yourself and realize that you have some internal work to do. For me, ultimately, I set the boundary for a separation. And it was so hard for me to do because I had not yet worked on my fear of abandonment. And I knew that he would just discard me the minute we were separated, which is exactly what he did. He didn't communicate with me anymore. It was very difficult to communicate with him, even over finances and other things that needed to be addressed. He ended up getting a lot of therapeutic help. I was able to arrange an intervention type therapeutic strategy. Whether we got back together or not wasn't my concern. It was just to help bring some sanity to the situation. And he was willing to go through the therapy. And ultimately we did reconcile after a 3-year separation. And there's a story behind that. It wasn't like I was waiting for 3 years. And, it was just, I worked on myself, worked on my trauma, worked on changing my belief systems about myself and about how relationships should function, about, I don't need to submit to a dominating person. I can be my own person, make my own decisions, love myself, regardless of how he describes them. But ultimately, we were able to work it out. And I know that's very rare. And so that's not my ultimate goal for you. My goal for you is to be strong and secure in yourself. And that takes deep work identifying where your fears really lie so that you can talk that out with somebody and somebody helpful. And there's a lot of books that you can read about codependency that will really help you. There's one that I like called the Human Magnet Syndrome. It's how we attract this type of person and how we're actually attracted to this kind of person. And it has to do with how we were raised. Even if we had loving parents, we may not realize how emotionally unavailable they were and how that affected us. So it's a good book to start from, and it tells you the kind of therapeutic work that you need to do on yourself. So I find it really helpful. But there are other great books out there that I would tap into. The more education you can bring yourself. I don't want you to just like immerse yourself in education. I want you to balance it out with activities and other things that bring you joy. But it is a time to educate yourself and about your situation. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Annette. So that is it for today that I see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, everybody, happy holidays and happy New Year. And we'll see you in the new year. Thank you for being with us today. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.